Hey there, Crushers. It's Lily coming to you in week 6. I hope you're having a great time so far in your Crushing Cravings course. You've covered a lot of ground already. You've definitely crossed the halfway point. And I'm just hoping you're doing really well, trying out all your different short-term intermittent fasting methods, finding the ones that work for you and can help you stay in that beautiful land of Ketopia that is free from cravings, free from those food addiction symptoms that we have all come to just hate. And it's different in Ketopia, and it's different when you get a handle on them and you can think clearly again. But as we discussed last time, there's always the topic of temptation. And temptation can be a real bear, as we discussed. And today we're going to talk about what to do when you actually haven't had the ability to resist that temptation. That is known as a lapse. And we're going to talk about that today because you need to understand what it means and what to do if it happens. And frankly, it's going to happen. This isn't like eating food, being addicted to food. It's not like just being able to quit something once and for all. We need food in order to survive. So every now and then we're going to have a lapse, and that means a temporary failure. Okay, remember, it's temporary. What we're doing here is a transformational journey. We're learning how to live in a new way, and we're learning new tools that will take us through our lapses and onto the other side. It's a temporary failure in your concentration or your memory of what to do or your judgment of what to do better. So other synonyms include failure and failing, but you might want to just look at it as a little more like a slip, an error, a mistake. Okay, just please try not to jump all over yourselves and feel like you're just a failure and give up entirely. That is always going to be the reason that you stay the way you always were. We're letting lapse also mean an interval or a passage of time, because time is one of our best friends when we're feeling a lapse. So I want you to think of it as more of a right or a privilege or an agreement that you've made with yourself that has temporarily become invalid. Like, let's say it's a lease that you've had with yourself on your life and you have to renew it. Okay, when you lapse, it means you haven't claimed or renewed your right to occupy that space, that Ketopia. So you've expired. You've let your agreement with yourself become void. And you're at risk of losing that good place that you want to stay in. So if you continue in the lapse, you're going to gradually pass into an inferior state or condition. So we want to think of lapse in a different term. Think of it as a time lapse. Okay, this is more the time that you need to take to think about it differently. You say to yourself, okay, I've hit the rumble strips. I'm off the side of the road. Maybe I'm just parked on the side of the road, not really knowing what to do. Maybe I've really gone way off and taken some dirt road that's completely off the highway of where I was going. And maybe for whatever reason, I needed to take that little turn and hit the dirt road or find a pothole and find my car up on jacks, or find myself having to call AAA. Now I need to really sit there and wait. Maybe I need to do some more intensive work with Lily. Maybe I need to sign up for some extra sessions, with Dr. Booty. I mean, maybe there are things that you have to do to get yourself back on track that are a little more severe. But one of the first things that you can do when you feel the temptation getting the better of you is just take a beat. Okay, you know that you want to take a step back. See things from the bigger picture. This picture here on the slide is the time lapse of the Earth spinning, and these are the clouds in the sky that spin over the course of the night. And sometimes just taking a step back and giving yourself some time to see things from a little bigger perspective is really the way to do it. You can remind yourself, lapses in your recovery goals help determine the course of your recovery journey. Because yes, you have to eat, but no, you don't have to eat drugs. Okay, managing your cravings is the key. Now, if you're just feeling like it's your cravings that are getting the best of you, then yeah, maybe you've got to look at what it is that you're eating. Are you actually off of your keto sticks. I mean, are you back in an addicted state? Okay, because that's something that you really want to check on. But if you're just feeling like you're losing your motivation or you're not feeling like taking care of yourself, we have to realize that one of the best ways to deal with it is simply to let some time pass. Take a beat. If that means, if you're, at the end of the night, try to go to bed a little earlier and just let yourself sleep. Because you're going to fast all night long. And when you wake up in the morning, you're going to pee on your sticks. And if you haven't done too much damage to your ketopia while you were in your lapse, then you may not have re-addicted yourself and you can start your day fresh as a daisy. But if you pee on your sticks and you see that you have no ketones in your system, then chances are very high now that you are re-addicting yourself again. You've had too much sugar, and you're probably going to have to use some short-term intermittent fasting to undo your addiction. Okay, but this is what we do. We do undo it over and over and over again as many times as you need to. And then once you get back into ketopia, then you got to think about what happened and why you didn't pay more attention to your rumble strips, because those are there to help you before you get too far off the track. And it does get easier each time you do it. So even Nelson Mandela said that the greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising up every time we fall. Now, if you're like me, I'm sorry, but I used to give up. Okay, I mean, I first knew that I was addicted to food when I was 18 years of age. I went to my first Overeaters Anonymous meeting, and there were lots of people there who were all in the same boat. But they didn't talk at all about food being a drug. They talked entirely about behavior modification and their willpower, and how their willpower was lacking, and how they couldn't understand it. But all that talking didn't work for me, and so I thought I must be a really weak-willed person, because if Overeaters Anonymous couldn't help me, then there must be something really super wrong with me. But there really isn't anything wrong with me. I was just giving up too soon. I'm here to tell you there's nothing wrong with you. And once you get off the drugs, then your brain and your body can function normally, and you will begin to eat normally again. Because it's a crazy thing to go to Overeaters Anonymous, and that's based on a 12-step program, like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. And in those programs, you never hear people talking about how to take heroin in moderation. They don't have to do that in their drugs. And they didn't talk about food as a drug when I was in Overeaters Anonymous. And that's what I thought it was going to be about. I thought they were going to help me get off addictive substances. That's the core of their other programs. But when all they talked about was food and how it's like a fuel, and never talked about it like a drug, and then they looked at addiction like it was purely a psychological problem, that lack of willpower, that behavior modification, the diet that you needed to go on, the talk therapy. They try to apply the 12 steps, but they never really talk about it like a drug. See, the thing is, it is like a drug in some of the behavioral after effects, because it makes you feel bad about yourself, and it makes you feel shame, and it makes you not be fully present in your relationships and stuff like that. But it doesn't usually change your personality to the extent that you can't remember what you do, or you start stealing from the people that you love, or behaving in a way that's really more a result of the bad effect that drugs and alcohol have on your brain and your ability to be who you are. Those drugs really change your personality from somebody that people recognize to somebody that they don't. Our drugs tend to change more of our shape and our self-esteem. So it's more of an internal thing that has more of an effect on us than it does on our families. It may to the same extent, because maybe like with our mates, we don't look the same way we used to. We don't want to have relations the same way we used to. We don't feel as good about ourselves. We don't take care of our health. We may die prematurely. But for the most part, our personalities are still intact, even when we're suffering from the effects of our addictions. But that's why we have to not give up, so that we can have the tools and the skills and the support from our families and from ourselves when we're in that place that is just so hard on us internally. When when you practice this, when you get really good at handling your relapse, you don't have to look at it as failure, and you keep practicing it until you can perfect it. It's about your mindset, over and over and over again. But that said, let's take a look at some of the tools we can use to prevent relapse. Because you have to admit, there are some high-risk situations, okay? And then when we put ourselves into those situations, well, you're playing with fire, and, you really have to decide, what am I going to do here? What coping skills do I need to practice? And mostly, when you put yourself in a high-risk situation, you have to be mindful of how you're feeling. How and what do you feel, right? Because for me, my high-risk situations are things like rejection and things like sensitivity to certain scenarios. And and also stress is a high trigger for me. When I get into a stressful situation, I tend to just buckle down and want to kind of dig my way out of it. Some people put their head down and go into a hole and they collapse and hide. Other people use substances to forget, and they get into a behavior that's about denial. So there's lots of different ways to respond to a high-risk situation. But the first thing you have to do is be mindful of how you feel. And the second thing you can use is a contract to help you limit the use of your drugs during these high-risk situations. When you're monitoring yourself, you can make contracts between yourself and practice fulfilling these obligations. When you keep promises to yourself, when you put your health as a priority, then you're making good on a promise that you've made to yourself. So if you have kids, for example, and you made a contract to pick your kids up from school, and even if you had a stressful day or you're in a high-risk situation, if you can still make it over to pick up your kids that day, then somehow you have the coping skills to manage your way out of a high-risk situation towards a contract that you've agreed to or an agreement that you've made. But for some reason, we tend to manage these agreements with other people much better than we manage the ones to ourselves. So what happens when we break promises to ourselves? This is a technique called cognitive restructuring. When you perceive yourself breaking a contract or lapsing or failing, what happens? Do you start to criticize yourself, or do you start to encourage yourself? Or do you start to learn and recognize and go, oh my gosh, I just did it again? Some of the things that you can do during this cognitive restructuring are to try to work on an immediate versus a delayed effect. Okay, you can take the same road, or you can take a little turn and do it just a little bit differently. Sometimes it's not about taking an entirely different highway. It's just about taking a different approach to driving on that highway. Maybe you drive a little more slowly. Maybe you pull over and rest for a little bit. Maybe you pull off for a little bit. Maybe you don't take the road that day. There's ways to stay on the path, but if you practice your cognitive restructuring and get yourself off of that all or nothing perspective, that's what you can do to take some action and change the way you're thinking about your failure and about your lapse. Okay, again, practice that immediate versus the delayed approach. The time lapse is a way to get out of a lapse. Just sort of stop what you're doing, act immediately, okay? And try to go forward with some of the stuff that you do know how to do. And try to be kind to yourself with the things that you have achieved. Okay, so just take some time, look at some of these other things on this slide, and see if any of this stuff applies to you in your life, and if you can educate yourself out of a relapse. All right, another thing is to just remember that even after it happens, what are you going to do? Okay, so the slide before that was trying to stop you from getting into a relapse and using some tools and cognitive thinking and behavior modifications. But what about after a relapse? Okay, one of the first things you want to do is realize, okay, I've relapsed. I need to take responsibility. I need to act on this. I need to take responsibility. Can I reach out to anyone? Is there a group that I can talk to? Have I made any friends in the class? Are there other people who are going through the same thing I'm going through? Can I find some fellowship there? Can I take some other recovery actions? Can I use some of the tools? Can I, pee on my sticks? Am I avoiding peeing on my sticks because I don't want to see where I am? Things might not be as bad as I think they are, but I'll never know if I don't take a moment and try to help myself. Try to take some recovery actions and manage those after effects. Because if you eat one bag of popcorn and then you go out and buy 15 more, you're not really managing the after effects. You're kind of diving straight into the hole of a crisis. You're moving towards, a real potentially difficult hole to dig out of. So you want maybe in those scenarios to seek some professional help. Maybe take a couple extra sessions with me or with the doctor, or if you have somebody else that you work with, get professional help if you're really feeling a crisis coming on. But also, if you can, if that's not happening, just learn from the experience and learn from that anyway, even if you are in a crisis, because this is your journey. And you have to decide if you're going to be a friend or an enemy to yourself along the way. Okay, you can either learn or you can keep doing the same thing again and again and again. Because if you're going to break your food addiction, you're going to have to do that again and again and again until you get better at it. Okay, this is progress. It's not perfection. It's a chance to keep learning. And if you haven't found the way that works yet, guess what? Life will keep giving you that same lesson because it's an important lesson on your path. This lesson is likely to be the final key to your happiness. But don't be complacent about working on it, and don't beat yourself up when you realize that you haven't figured it all out yet. Okay, if you were a child trying to learn something new, you wouldn't kick your kid down every time they made a mistake. You'd keep encouraging them to keep trying and never give up. And you'd see the progress they'd be making because it does get easier as they practice. Well, this is the same way you have to think about yourself. Yes, you've been eating. Yes, you've been doing what you thought were the right things all along, but you're learning new things now. So if you have to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and start all over again, then do that, because you're not alone. But every time you go to sleep, remember, you start a fast. So just wake up and keep it going. And if you can only keep it going until lunchtime, then keep it going and congratulate yourself for that extended fast. And then at lunchtime, pick something good to eat that will encourage you to feel good about your day. Because this is not something that's about failure. It's about something that you're trying. And just because you've slipped, it doesn't mean that you can't recover. So keep trying. Don't give up. Find out how to learn from your relapse so you can succeed the next time. Okay, and remember, this has got to happen inside of you. This is an epidemic in our culture. Every year, food addictions cost the United States over $700 billion in health care, in crime, and in lost productivity. But it's the personal cost of the addictions that have the greatest impact. The cost to our self-esteem, come on, can you ever put a price on that? The cost to our families, our friends, and our loved ones, because we're suffering and they care about us, but we're falling victim to our addiction again and again, and we're hiding it from them. Almost 50% of the population is suffering from this, and still no one talks about it. It's the elephant in the room. We hide it. And addicted individuals may, when they do report it, have a difficulty with compulsive eating and their attempts to cut down, but we're not really talking about it. We're not really dealing with this as the epidemic that it is. And as you walk through the grocery store, look at what parents are buying for their children, because they're often eating one way, but teaching their kids to eat a different way, to get them to be quiet, to give them what they want, to give them food they can take in their lunch bags. So in the checkout line, see what the people in front of you and in the back of you are buying, and see if you're kind of going along better or worse than they are. And check to see if you have a double standard between what you feed yourself and what you feed your kids or your pets or your loved ones. Because this is a very personal journey that we're on. But when you can take a step back from it, and that's about getting the perspective that we need, you'll start to see that this is happening to our nation and to our children. These are our future leaders. They're going to lead our species into profit or loss. So this is serious, you guys. There's a prevalence of food addiction in obese participants. It's 25%. And those are just the ones who are admitting it. So this is not just happening in obese people, because a lot of obese people are not even aware that they have a food addiction. Okay, because this is happening across our country. And, if we don't get a handle on it, we're going to end up with a bunch of people who are running to have bariatric surgery because they don't know how to control their appetites. And no one is dealing with the fact that our foods are full of addictive drugs. Okay, now, chocolate and things, these are not the answer, but they're not always the enemy either. It's not just the fact that it's chocolate bar, that it's got some sugar in it. It's a question of how much sugar you're having, along with how much other preservatives and addictive combinations of food you're having. If you're just having a bar that's 90% dark chocolate, that's not one of the worst things that you could have. In fact, if you have these kinds of snacks and treats in your cupboard or your little snack drawer, I applaud you, because to think that you'll have a life without treats is a little bit ridiculous. We want to give ourselves treats, but we also want to find treats that are not in the form of food. That's what helps us with our relapse. Because when we go out to celebrate with a big old sticky gooey pizza or a big pile of cake, we want to rethink about how we celebrate and how we reward ourselves. So you might want to give yourself a non-food treat. You might want to give yourself a trip to the spa, or put, $100 in your vacation fund. Take all the money that you're not spending on food and put it into a reward fund for yourself. Because I don't know about you, I spent over $10,000 a year on food that I didn't need to be eating. So I take that money now and I go on a vacation. Whether it's a cruise or whether it's a treat of some kind. Maybe it's a down payment on something I really want, like a new car or something like that. Whatever it is that feels good to me, I take it. But I like to kind of take my treats as they come. I don't always want to wait until it's a great big once-a-year event or a great big purchase or something. I like to have little treats as I go, and I like to reward myself every week for the progress that I've made and remind myself of the temptations that I've overcome and the relapses that I haven't had. Okay, so remember, the answer is not in rewarding yourself with food. So think about that. Even if you are dealing with rewarding yourself through eating, you can realize that life in ketopia is better, and it's easier to stay off the drugs once you've broken free. So why do you want to reward yourself with a trip out of ketopia? Because all you're going to have to do is get off your drugs again. The feelings are so much better in ketopia than the frustration and the self-loathing and the fear and the shame. But you can't get there from negativity and with an addicted brain. You got to break your addiction, or you will fail forever. And this is what I've been telling you all along. So if you need to break your addiction, then break it. Break it again and again and again. It's really not that hard. You can pretty much do it overnight. And if that doesn't do it, then go a little longer until you pee on a stick and you see some ketones in your body, in your blood. In your urine, excuse me. You know where this road leads if you don't take it. So take some action. Use your tools. Make a decision and change. But first, get off the drugs. All right? White knuckling your way through your day is no good. You know what that's like, okay? You've been an addict. You've been exhausted by constantly battling your cravings. So trust me. Most people who are not addicted to food do not spend this much time on anything because it's exhausting. But you're going to have so much energy left over. You'll be ready to do the things that you want. That energy is something you've been spending on fighting your addiction. But you got to get there. Okay? If you're going to live without a food addiction, you have to learn to live without living on the edge of temptation all the time. That's almost as hard as just being addicted and just giving into it. Okay, you've got to get off the drugs. Don't try to live your life right on that edge of temptation all the time. Because there's a lot of go-to old habits that you might just fall into. But one day, if you stay enough times, long enough in ketopia, you'll start to wonder why you're still running to those old habits. Because after a while, they just start to fade away. And it starts to feel like a new beginning for you. And you bless the first day that you actually forget to eat. Okay, that's how you write your life. You don't want to write it drunk all the time. You don't want to write it from a place of frustration and panic. And you've already written that story. Now it's time to edit your life. You want to edit it from a place where you're sober, from a place of ketopia. I have days when I'm feeling so good that I don't eat until 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And even if I'm carrying a bar in my pocket, I'm still in the grips of fear of being without food. But these days I really never even feel the urge to pull that thing out of my pocket and tear into it because I'm not hungry and I don't have cravings anymore. I'm free and I'm doing stuff that I would really prefer to be doing, like walking or tango dancing or skiing or hiking or having, social interactions with friends and family that I was avoiding before. There's just so much that you can become open to in your new life. You'll start doing all the things you've been putting on hold. You'll allow your own growth. You'll embrace the excitement. Your possibilities start to fill in all by themselves. And this is you editing your life with a brain that is not on drugs anymore. You're finding ways to fill in all that time. Okay, but the thing you're going to do when you're in a relapse is you're going to have to grapple with whether or not you want to fall back into that negativity. Because if you're all the way out of ketopia, if you're back into an addictive state, this is just another opportunity for you to just fall down that negative scale of emotional standing. Your lapse is just that. But if you overdraw your checking account and you don't keep spending, you don't have to continue to overdraw it. You just pay the overdraft fee and you figure out what you'll have to go without because you're trying to buy something that you need and you're going to make up for that deficit in your account. Okay, so you only have so much to work with, but you can't get all down on yourself or call yourself a failure or just go, what the hell? I'll just spend the mortgage money too and the car payment money too. And then why don't I just dig into the kids' college fund because I'm just a complete failure? Well, this is the equivalent of you just giving up on yourself just because you've had a relapse with your food addiction. Okay, if you wouldn't do that with your kids' college fund or your savings or, your debt management, or if you wouldn't mortgage your house just to buy food, then don't do it here. It's not that bad. Okay, you got a little fender bender. All right, maybe your insurance charged you a deductible. Maybe you even got a traffic citation. But you don't throw your driver's license into the shredder and decide you should never be on the road again because you're a failure. Okay, and that's all that a lapse really is. It's another little blip. It's a rumble strip that you haven't gotten off of in time. You didn't pay attention to it, okay? So let's pay attention. Pay attention to the negativity that is your go-to place. And don't fall back into it. Don't turn this mountain into a molehill. Don't let your fear and your stress and your doubt and your anger or your laziness or your cheating or your exhaustion or your frustration or your unworthiness or your unconscious habits become a reason to fall off into the negative hole. These are all symptoms of a lifestyle that's unsatisfactory, yes, but they lead also to an increasingly negative mindset. And that can be really difficult to deal with up front. And it can maybe have to be dealt with separately from your food addiction. If you have a lot going on in your life that's expressing itself in the way that you eat and in the way that you take care of yourself, you've got a lot of unresolved emotions, or you've got some chronically high stress, or there are some other things going on in your life that need to be dealt with in addition to your addiction. But first, deal with your addiction, because you cannot adequately address any of those other bigger pieces of your life if your mind is still on drugs. All right, there may be more hiding behind here. And that's why we keep getting these same rocks thrown in our path. We haven't learned yet because we're dealing with the symptoms, not the root cause. Now, the root cause of your addiction is your sugar, but the behavioral causes behind why you're using food to self-satisfy or self-nourish or self-soothe, those are things that are a lot deeper and really need to be looked at. Because people who are oftentimes running to an addiction of one kind or another are avoiding things that are significant components of their life that are making them unhappy, and they don't have significant tools to deal with them. But the tool is not to use drugs, okay? There's nothing you can learn while you're addicted. And being addicted to sugar and carbs is just the same thing as being addicted to heroin or cocaine or alcohol. Yes, it doesn't make you pass out. It doesn't change your personality and cause you to, get high. But it does give your brain a distinct dopamine response, which results in a feeling of pleasure. Okay, you don't have all the mind-altering, mood-altering components that go along with it, but you still have the same dopamine release that drug addicts have. So you can't think clearly when all you're doing is seeking drugs, seeking drugs, seeking drugs. Your brain will have a hard time changing out of a negative brain and into a positive brain if you're still addicted. So even if you're working on those other things, it's easier to get your mind off drugs before you try to learn to get your mind off of negativity. Negativity is something that people become addicted to as well. So start with the easier piece. Break your food addiction first. And if you feel like you're having trouble breaking your food addiction, remind yourself about your portions. Because if you need to go back to your food log sometimes, and you may be actually underestimating your actual consumption. If you're not going to carry around tablespoons and cups and measuring cups, take a look at this chart, because these are this is pretty close when it comes to what you can measure. Like, for example, a palm. If you eat that much meat, that's about 4 ounces. And that cup, if you cup your hand and you pour something into it, like rice or popcorn or blueberries, that's about a cup. And most of us have about 3 or 4 of those before we think we're having a cup. 2 cups is 2 hands. Everything you can hold in 2 hands side by side. Okay, so just bear in mind, you're probably having more than you think you are. So be attentive to how much you're eating, not just what, but how much. Because if you're having 2 cups of rice, that's a little bit more carbs than you probably want to have if you're going to maintain your addiction-free state. So get real about that, all right? So mindfulness is about the same thing too. Pay attention to how much you're eating and when you're eating. Are you just indulging yourself? Are you eating when you're not paying attention? Are you failing to get real about your quantities? Are you pigging out or binging or going back into the grips of your addiction? A lot of it has to do with just not being mindful and not knowing where your thresholds are. If you're going over your thresholds, then you need to go back and test where they are. Because if you're not using your food logs and you're just relying on your good judgment, maybe you need to go back and actually measure. Refine that balance between eating the things you like in moderation and losing control of the situation. If you're dealing with a relapse and you can't eat just one, then maybe it's better if you don't have any at all. I sometimes walk in and I think I'm going to buy cottage cheese, and then I wander down the candy aisle, and the next thing you know, I'm looking at Swedish Fish and Skittles, and wow, that's not the aisle that I need to be on when I'm trying to shop for a relapse, for dealing with relapse. So if you can eat just 1 or 2 on most days, but when you're on your relapse, you're eating 5 or 17 or 50, why don't you just take that food out of your house altogether? Just don't bring it home. And if you can eat ice cream a couple spoonfuls at a time normally, or you can keep raisins in the house like I do and use them as treats, well, then that's fine. But when I'm relapsing, I do not replenish that supply. Even those good foods are a trick. I mean, really, raisins, my body doesn't know the difference between raisins and Skittles. It doesn't really know. I know because the raisins don't have the chemistry and the food coloring and all the preservatives and all that man-made recipe that is done in a lab that's trying to get me addicted. But they still have the same sugar. So I don't bring any of that stuff home. I'm watching out for those sneaky snakes, and a lot of them are in my head. And if I can't eat just one of it when I'm trying to get out of relapse, I try to just stay busy and strong and get in a good place before I even want to try to play that dangerous game with myself. Because I like living in Ketopia. And in my neighborhood, we watch out for those snakes. And we try to get them rounded up and have little border patrols, when my tolerances are wearing thin, when I'm walking that tightrope, when I'm right on the edge of maybe addicting myself again, I'll pull out the measuring cup. I'll spend a few moments on a food log. I'll get into a meal where I'm really thinking about what I'm doing, and I get real with my portions, and I get real with my thinking. I get present, and I pay attention. And that's what I'm trying to say. Greater awareness of your triggers and responses is important because you can interrupt a previously automatic behavior. A lot of this stuff is not unconscious. So try not to be too judgmental about it. Detach yourself from those automatic thoughts that often lead to the relapse. Even when I was quitting smoking, I remember I had a dream that I was smoking. And in my dream, I woke up and I was so panicked because I thought I'd started smoking again. It was so automatic in my dream that it took me a while for my conscious thought to keep up with my autonomic reactions and responses. And yes, I was glad that I was dreaming, but I realized too that I have to stay in the present moment. And even if that had been a real life scenario where I had started smoking again, then I need to just throw away the cigarettes. And why are they in my pocket? And it's the same way. Why are the Skittles in your drawer? Why are you buying these for your children? Are you telling yourself you're buying them for your children? Because what are you teaching your children? I meet so many people who buy things for somebody else and end up eating them themselves. And then that's how they justify having them in the house. Okay, mindfulness is important. Objectivity is important, so stay present. Go back to your mirror. Say something nice to yourself. Accept where you are right now and say, okay, I slipped, but I can fix this. All right? You're having to get some strategies. If you believe that you can fix it and that you deserve to fix it, believe that you're important, that your health is important. All this other stuff that's distracting you is important, but it's not as important as taking care of myself. My life matters. My self-esteem matters. The way I feel and look in my skin matters. My happiness matters. I'm allowed to work on my happiness. I'm allowed to want my happiness. I'm allowed to make time and take time to do the things that are important to me. This is my life. And yes, people rely on me, but I also decide what is important to me, to my life. Every day, I decide. So you've got to make a positive shift. After you break your addiction, you always have to go back to your mindset and your tools. Go back to your goals. Build a new focus wheel. Sit down, use something, do something, or move around. Go out for a walk. Talk to yourself. Meditate. Think about what you're allowing or disallowing. Think about what you're doing. Think about who you're blaming. Are you doing something that you always do? Do you pinch yourself off from your own well-being? Are you allowing this goodness into your life experience? Is your boat pointed upstream? Are you paddling desperately against the current? Do you need to turn your boat around? Do you need to start going with the flow of your goodness? Do you need to do less, fight less, and allow more goodness? That starts with calming yourself and finding your vibration. That starts with your meditation. Do you need to go to sleep? If you just can't calm your mind, do you need to just wait until this day is over and start again fresh in the morning? Can you find your center? Can you reconnect with your highest purpose? Do you ever talk to yourself about your highest purpose? Can you go back and listen to some of those audios on the quintessential mindset? Because you have access to the course. So ask yourself if you are deliberately creating something or if you're deliberately berating yourself. Find the higher vibration. Find the next best thought. Shift from negative to positive all day, every day. Give yourself 17 seconds. Break those chains over and over again. They're chains of negativity. They're chains of behavior. They're chains of feeling unworthy. They're chains of feeling that you don't deserve to take care of yourself. They're chains of feeling disappointment. Chains of being let down, feeling life isn't fair. It owes you something. You never get what you want. That is negativity chaining you to a journey of more negative feelings. Okay, this is a journey of transformation. And if you're feeling that way, then your problem is in your mindset. Okay, your food is just a symptom of how you're feeling about your life. Because if you're not addicted and you're still feeling bad and you're still doing things that are good for yourself, then you have a bigger problem here. Don't take it for granted that you know how much you're eating. Prove it to yourself. Pee on your sticks. Go back through the refrigerator and the cupboards. See if you've been slipping. But if your food isn't the problem, if you're eating right, then you have to break the chains of negative thinking. And this is an ongoing process. You have to keep practicing that too, one day at a time. That's a great thing I learned from Overeaters Anonymous, is that you take one day at a time. Okay? Addictions, they're hard. A lot of movie stars have it made and they have addictions now that they're dealing with. But there can be a lot of peace on the other side of an addiction. And sometimes our addictions are meant to bring us face to face with the most important things in our lives that we're avoiding. We're avoiding them because we're too busy. We're avoiding them because we have children. We're avoiding them because we're a single mom or a single dad, or we have blah, 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 blah. Everybody comes before we do. Everybody comes before us, and we're doing right by other people, so we deserve to eat. We deserve to treat ourselves. And even if you don't feel that way, sometimes you feel compelled to eat. Well, that's your food addiction, okay? But after you get out of your food addiction, you've got to come back to ketopia. A lapse is just another piece of the puzzle that you're learning to deal with. So don't quit. But you're doing some deep learning here. And if you're feeling frustrated, and if you're feeling like you're on a negative spin downward, even if you're not relapsing into food, take advantage of this opportunity to learn. Take advantage of it. Ask for help or get help yourself. And what I'm saying is, don't wallow in your sad story. Realize there's something going on here. And you think, oh, wow, I get to learn this again. Okay? You don't have to go over it in agonizing detail. You don't have to wallow in it. You don't have to retell it all the time. Look what so-and-so did to me. Someone else made me feel this way. No. You're feeding the monster of negativity. And I get it. People do things that is just outrageous. People do things that affect our lives and throw us off our high-flying discs. They bounce us off off of our positive vibration and onto a negative one. But that doesn't mean that you can't come out of it. That doesn't mean that you can't reach out and ask for encouragement from yourself, from other people. Sometimes the hardest things are what set us free. The things that we're most afraid of doing, they're the very things that can set us free. That's why we keep learning them. So is there anything more important than releasing yourself from the living hell? But no one can do this for you. You have to decide that it's important. Is there anything more important than your recovery? A relapse is just a sign that you're still on your journey. So put your recovery ahead of everything else, because this is the most important journey of your life. And you deserve peace of mind. And it is possible to have. So wow, what a journey we're on. So far we've been peeing on sticks, we've been doing food logs, we've been learning about short-term intermittent fasting, we've made our way into ketopia, we've been tempted out of ketopia, maybe we've even relapsed and have to find our way back into ketopia. But we've come a long way together. Now it's time to focus on some of the powerful growth that is still to come, because you're moving into the dragon phase. And this phase is really, really cool. So buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride. And I'll see you on the next module. Meanwhile, keep crushing on. Lily out.